remote tonight, myself included. We'll roll call everything. So Chuck.
Here.
Sarah.
Here.
Aaron.
Here.
Tom.
Here.
Carla.
Here.
And Sean is here. Okay. Let me do a quick run through the agenda and then we'll get right in. We're going to start tonight with our public hearing on the FY24 budget. From there, we'll move into our consent agenda. We've got a METCO update. I know we've got Mr. Martin and a number of other folks there to speak about METCO this evening. And then our last agenda item for the evening will just be any additional budget discussion the committee may wish to have tonight in advance of our vote next week. Of course, we'll have an opportunity for discussion next week as well before we take the vote. But since we're not really open to speaking during the hearing, I wanted to make that an agenda item as well. So relatively straightforward agenda this evening, and we will start with our public hearing. So Carla, would you start us with a motion, please?
Sure. I move to open the public hearing on the FY24 budget.
And roll call vote. Oh, thank you. Seconded by, sorry, was that Tom?
Yep.
Okay. Roll call vote. Chuck?
Yes. Yeah. Here.
Sarah?
Aye. Aye.
Aaron?
Aye.
Tom?
Aye.
Carla?
Aye.
And Sean, aye. Okay, the hearing is open. So we'll treat this, from a rules perspective, more or less the same as we do typical public comments. If there's anybody in the audience, I don't see anybody on the Zoom, but if there's anybody in the audience that would like to make any comments or questions on the budget as part of the public hearing, now's your opportunity. And Tom, if you could help me out, Dr. Coram or anybody else in the room wishes to make a comment.
Dr. Coram feels like he's put on the spot now. He has to make a comment.
I got a special invitation, Jeffrey Coram, Ridge Road.
Can you hear him, Sean?
Yeah, we can hear.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. So, I applaud the administration for putting together the budget. I'm pleased to see a number of the improvements that were discussed and how they tied well into the strategic goals of the district. A couple, when I look back at it, and I think, like these assistant principals were something that we talked about, years ago, like when the first override was up there, and like if we went to the full amount, then the superintendent at the time was talking we would do these assistant principals, and what an important part that was years ago. And part of me is asking, how did we find the money this year that we couldn't find 5 or 6 years ago before the override? And are we sure that we have the funding sustainably to keep this going and to keep decreasing that full-day kindergarten fees? So, I applaud you for what you've done, but I don't know if you can shed a little more light on exactly how that came about in a sustainable way. Thank you.
So not for the committee to discuss at this point, but Ms. Baton or Dr. Malachewski, if you want to offer some comments, you can certainly do so.
I can certainly start. I will, and certainly Dr. Malachewski can add on. First of all, I'm sorry I'm not there this evening. I was a little under the weather, so I'm happy to join you remotely. We have examined the budget very carefully over the last year and a half. We've looked from the bottom up, from the top down. We have explored with our leadership team a number of ways to deliver services and improve those services by leveraging the resources we have. So, for example, we dove deeply into our grants and our special revenue funds to find ways that we could improve the use of those funds. I think a really great example is the 240 grant, which is an annual grant provided by the federal government. And through that grant, we support and hire teachers. Because those teachers are licensed, the federal and state rules are that we have to pay a second round of MTRS retirement. It's essentially a fee. And just by shifting out certified staff with our hourly paraprofessional staff, we were able to save more than $80,000. So that was a very straightforward savings. In addition, we've looked at a number of different areas in our budget. We have been able to terminate a contract for out-of-district services that was previously shared through Wakefield. We've had a net decrease of 3 students who were previously assigned to out-of-district tuition placements. We pulled back a little bit on an unassigned out-of-district tuition placement fee. Our budget carries unassigned tuition in order to be prepared for any unanticipated needs of our students or move-ins by new students who might need out-of-district services. We've charged some lunchtime paraprofessional salaries to the Special Revenue Fund. There have just been a number of ways that we have, I think, better leveraged and better used the funding that we have available, which then freed up more funding to sustain some of these new positions, like the assistant principals at the elementary level, and like our continued movement toward full-day K, free full-day K.
Thank you, Ms. Baton. Tom, anybody else there in the room?
Looking around, there are people here, but there are no hands up. And everybody here for Dr. Corum is on the agenda otherwise, so.
Okay. All right, then with that, I will accept a motion, Carla, to close the hearing.
I move to close the public hearing on the FY24 budget.
Second.
Seconded by Tom. Chuck?
Aye.
Sarah?
Aye.
Erin?
Aye.
Tom?
Aye.
Carla?
Aye.
And Sean, aye. Okay, the hearing's closed. Just for the benefit of anybody who may be watching at home or what have you, the hearing is a formality that's required as part of the budget process. Certainly not the end of our budget discussions, so the door is very much still open if any questions should arise between now and our vote next week. So feel free to reach out to us or the administration or participate in next week's meeting if anybody has any additional questions or comments. Okay, so with that, let's move to the consent agenda. And Carla, is there a motion?
I think we need a motion before that. I
What am
move
I
to
missing?
return. I move
Oh,
to
I'm
return
sorry.
to the. Yep. I move to return to the regular school committee meeting.
Thank you, Carla. Seconded by Chuck. And then for the vote, Chuck? Sarah?
Aye.
Erin?
Aye.
Tom?
Aye.
Carla?
Aye.
Sean? Yes, aye. All right, now we're back in our regular meeting and all those comments I just made still hold. Okay, now we'll move to the consent agenda. Carla, can we start with a motion? And we do a little bit of discussion here, but can we start with the motion, please?
Sure. I move to approve the consent agenda.
And is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Chuck. Okay, just before we go to a vote on this, Tom shared a couple of points of feedback that aren't reflected in your packet. On the January 5th minutes, I think it's the last 4 policies that are referenced in that, excuse me, in those minutes, DEC, DKC, GCF, and JICK. We actually didn't make any amendments on the floor, so we just need to strike the language that says as amended from those 4 policy discussions. We discussed, I think maybe some grammatical changes and things that have been made in between meetings, but there wasn't anything on the floor for amendments. And then in the January 9th minutes, this is my mistake. I noted that Sarah was remote. She was remote in the January 5th meeting, so we'll strike that as well. That's currently reflected in both meetings, which again is my mistake. So we'll take that off of January 9th and we'll make those edits. Are there any other comments on the consent agenda before we take the vote? Okay, we'll take the vote to approve the consent agenda with those minutes as amended. Chuck?
Aye.
Sarah?
Aye.
Erin?
Aye.
Tom?
Aye.
Carla?
Aye.
And Sean, aye. Okay, with that, we will move to our METCO update. Dr. Milichewski, I think I'll hand to you if you've got an introduction before we invite Mr. Martin and the others up to the dais.
Perfect. All right, so I'll just frame,
Oh, you know, sorry, Dr. Malachewski, I'm sorry. I skipped reports.
Reports.
I'm sorry. Give me
Remote, Sean. Struggling.
Yeah, I'm a little thrown off by this whole remote thing, if I'm being honest. So sorry about that. Let me just look around here. We'll start with Ms. Baton, if you've got any reports.
Yes, I briefly wanted to share with the school committee that we're very much looking forward to having Catherine Franzetti, our school nutrition director, join us for a school committee presentation next week. Catherine will present to us a status of our food service staff, their recruitment, retention, and professional development successes so far. This year, she's going to share with us how the responses and feedback received from student, family, and staff surveys have led to more healthy development of our menus. She was going to share how the team engaged with our schools and our community and local businesses to develop some progressive programs. And then lastly, she's going to overview some operational improvements and efficiencies that they've been able to gain so far in the very short 5 months she's been here. And if any of you have any special areas that you'd like her to cover, please let me know and we'll pass that on to Catherine. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Baton. Dr. Hardy.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I have a few updates for you. First, I wanted to let you know that we have opened our kindergarten registration for the upcoming school year. Always an exciting time when we think about welcoming our newest group of students and their families to our Reading Public Schools community. We sort of kicked off right at the beginning of the month with a virtual parent information night. It was well attended. And at that night, we were able to sort of introduce families to the Reading Public School, let them know sort of what they can expect as they become part of this community, and then fill them in on the logistics of the registration process, which always bring up a lot of questions, and share information about extended day. If anyone wasn't able to attend that night and is interested in that information, I have posted on our kindergarten registration page, which is on our district website, a link to that virtual night. We were able to record it, and we're in the process right now of compiling sort of an FAQ document based on some of the really great questions that families brought forward that night, and so that will be up shortly. And all our registration documents are posted as well. New this year, we made our registration form a fillable document, so folks can fill it in online. It's better than having everything handwritten, probably on both sides, easier for everybody. So we're excited about that little shift. Another new thing we're trying this year is we're offering an opportunity on January 31st in the evening for families to bring their registration packets in. We'll hold that registration night here at Reading Memorial High School, right down on Main Street. And we're asking families with last names between A and L, if you can come on that night between 6 and 6:30. And then M to Z will invite you between 6:30 and 7. The idea with coming in is just we know that those packets are really big, so sometimes posting them, it can be difficult. Also, sometimes families need photocopies of documents like birth certificates and immunization records, and we're happy to help with that night. And then we'll have staff on hand to answer questions as well. So we're looking forward to that event at the end of the month. The other piece I wanted to report on tonight is to let you know we are about this close to finalizing our program of studies at the high school. In fact, we have a meeting tomorrow with the instructional leadership team at the high school to kind of look at the final draft. That should get pushed out in about a week. Part of the conversation this year, and this has been led by Jess Callanan, is to think about how we embed in that program of studies, obviously those opportunities we need for students to have as part of Innovation Pathways, and also our dual enrollment. We're working with expanding next year some of the offerings with Middlesex Community College. So work has already been underway for our teachers here at Reading Memorial High School who have courses that will be participating to submit their resumes and their syllabus to Middlesex to have approval, and so those will be reflected in the program of study. So exciting opportunities for our high school students. In addition to this year, part of the conversation has been about really supporting that transition of students from 8th to 9th grade. And so we've put in place this year some meetings to allow our high school staff and our middle school staff to collaborate around that process to create clarity and understanding so that as students are being recommended, our middle school staff have all the information they need. And there will be, information will be coming out shortly, if it hasn't already, about our future freshman night that will be held here at the high school, which gives families and students an opportunity to learn more about the experience of transitioning here. If you have more questions about this, which I'm sure you do, I'm happy to try to answer them, but also want to let you know that Lynna Williams will be here on February 8th. Lynna is our Director of School Counseling, and she can provide even more detail about this transition process as she is heavily involved in supporting that work.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead, Erin.
I don't know if you can speak to this, but I know a big part of what the high school has been looking at in regards to obstacles for students scheduling has been the PE health requirement for freshmen and juniors, but also science labs. Can you speak to what changes, if any, are going to be made next year?
Yeah. This work is still underway, but I can let you know that we've set as a priority to ensure that parts of the schedule that really limit students' ability to access electives or that force a lot of study halls will be eliminated. In particular, we've been looking at the interaction of PE and health classes and the way to have those courses overlap in a semester, so that instead of attending every other day for the entire year, students would free up a semester for an elective. The move with the science labs is a little more complex, and there may be a move next year for some classes to not have that lab, but that some classes still will. That is still an ongoing conversation. Part of the bigger conversation that's starting to happen with the high school scheduling team is just in regards to, do all classes at some point need a longer block during the week in order to provide really that rigorous instruction and the deep learning that we want our students to have across all of our subject areas, instead of just limiting it to science. So that's part of what Principal Tracy is working on with the scheduling committee right now. I don't anticipate that we would see a change for that in the upcoming school year, but it certainly is something that we're considering. As we increase our offerings at the high school, we really need to think about what is the class structure that's going to allow students to engage in the type of learning that we know that they need to do.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Harvey. I'll say that kindergarten session was quite well run. It was a bit bittersweet attending it for our third and final time, but the registration improvements are much appreciated as well. Dr. Milczewski, any reports tonight?
I just have one thank you. I'd like to thank everyone involved in the annual Martin Luther King Jr. event on Monday. So thank you to all those on the town side and also on the school side. And I have to say that was one of my favorite events, and the events I felt really inspired by was since my time here in Reading. And I think a couple of things stuck out. It was just like, I think for me, a moment to pause and reflect. And the first piece was around, I felt just challenged by the call to leadership. I think that, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and others were, saying positions for people, me in leadership and in our community, the call to action and what that means for us and how we lead and how we interact with others. So I felt reflective on my own practice and what I can do to continue to be more effective in that area too. I was just really inspired by our students. We had some incredible performances by our students, and I'll thank them individually in a minute, but just blown away by their talent, blown away by their passion, and also really blown away by their advocacy. And we know that in our community, our students are our strongest advocates. And then the third piece, I just left with like an overwhelming sense of optimism for the community. I think anytime a community comes together around something that is value-driven, and to see so many people committed to a more inclusive or building a more just society, I think from anyone from ages, I saw some, people in front pack, so maybe 1.5 all the way through, I think was really inspiring to me. So I just want to thank all of those involved. I want to give a special shout out to our students who are involved, Jeremiah Sanford and Sophia Ortons, who are two MCs for the event. I think if you know Jeremiah and Sophia, they're both extremely involved in RMHS, lead a lot behind the scenes here in the community, but it was nice to see them in a public space taking that leadership role on. So thank you to Jeremiah and Sophia. And then the RMHS Jazz Ensemble, the RMHS Mixed Choir, and the Students of Color and Allies for Equity, Justice, and Inclusion. all of those participating in those groups, I think, really did our community proud, and I think did our community proud in something that is really so important around what we value in our community. So thank you to everyone involved, and looking forward to next year already.
Thank you, Dr. Milczewski. Okay, committee reports. I'll start with Chuck.
The Simons Way Exploratory Committee met last night. We had a presentation from Weston and Sampson regarding the environmental situation at the site, and there is potentially some environmental concerns with it, with the previous owner may have left some construction materials, and there's some old cars and stuff like that. So what we decided to do was, then we followed a discussion about, what we kind of want to do with the site or not do with the site. And we decided on a survey the town's going to work on putting out. And depending on what we decide from that survey, will determine what level of type of environmental report we'd want. I mean, if you're putting a facility or something there, you're going to have to do a lot more environmental analysis than you would if you were doing walking trails or something. So just, it's a great group, a lot of smart people, I really enjoyed it. I think that there'll be a lot of good discussions. That's it.
Sarah.
No reports.
Aaron.
No reports.
Tom.
Just a quick update. I sent, as we kind of discussed a couple weeks ago, I sent a note off to the bylaw committee to ask them to reconsider General Bylaw 4.2, which is the bylaw that we need for medical examinations for each new staff member. As a result of that conversation and as a result of the policy impacts that come with that, after talking with Dr. Milczewski. That was generally well received. I talked to Fidel as well, and there are things that Fidel and Sean from the town side already were highlighting in that space as well. So it sounds like that's going to potentially move forward pretty quickly and hopefully be ready for a warrant article in the April town meeting timeframe. So between the bylaw committee, policy subcommittee might be pulled into a bylaw meeting just to walk it through a little bit. But we expect that we'll have an article ready for the April town meeting to adjust that bylaw, and hopefully get town meeting to agree to adjust it appropriately.
Okay, thank you. Carla.
No report.
And I have no report. Okay, so now, Dr. Milczewski, we'll return to you to introduce our next agenda. Sorry for the interruption.
Great, so tonight we have our METCO update, and we have two parts to the METCO update. The first part is a high-level overview just of some of the strengths and challenges and opportunities within the program. And then the second part is we're going to have the opportunity to hear directly from two of our school counselors, METCO SAC positions, who are going to speak a little bit about just their first 6-7 months in the role and some things that they're excited about, some of the work that they're doing. And given that these are new roles, we thought the community would appreciate having the opportunity to have a little bit of back and forth dialogue too. So we'll kick it off first with the part on just an analysis of the program, and a little bit of framing for this is that we're joined tonight by, obviously, everyone knows our METCO director, Curtis Martin. We're also joined by Joseph Longbottom. I'll introduce Joseph. If you haven't had a chance to meet Joseph, Joseph is one of two Harvard doctoral fellows who are with us this semester. So Joseph is a candidate in the Educational Leadership Doctoral Program at Harvard, one of 25 in his cohort. It's year 1 of 3 in the program. As part of the program, him, as well as his 24 peers, are tasked with going out and working about a day and a half during the semester, the fall semester, to be in schools, in districts, thinking about systems level leadership. So Joseph completed his fellowship from the first part of the year, but decided he was willing to stay on with us and continue to support the work for the remainder of the year, which I think is really exciting for us. A little bit about Joseph. So most recently, prior to the program, program, Joseph was a principal in Aurora, Colorado. One of the things that I think Joseph was really proud about is, if you're familiar with the Colorado Department of Ed school performance rankings, Tom, I'm guessing you are, the 5 levels when Joseph took over the school was a priority improvement school, which is like right in the middle, the 3rd out of the 5 rankings within his, from 2017 to 2022, the school moved up all the way to the highest level, which became a performance school within his time. So if you want to do a little more research on that you can. So I just said something that gives Joseph a little credibility. I'm going to say something that's going to take away his credibility here. He is also a Chiefs fan, so that he wears, yes, it's a problem, especially for the Broncos.
Colorado, I mean, what's up with
Broncos fan, so I have to give the good with the bad there. Chargers fan, sorry, Joseph.
Good decisions.
And then one other fun fact about Joseph, too, is that Joseph's wife is due any day now with his second child, so if you see him run out tonight, I want you to know it's not because he's scared of the public pressure. So Joseph was tasked, during the beginning was tasked with just kind of shadowing some of our central office team to learn a little bit about just sort of the day-to-day work of the central office. But then I think was also didn't want to just sort of think about his own practice, but also want to try to add some value to the community. So he, partnered up with Mr. Martin, and they were, working through all different things within the METCO program, and decided just to say, hey, I'll give a little bit of a closer look on, hey, what is here to celebrate and what's here that maybe we can build on to bring our program to the next level. So tonight we're going to bring up the presentation. Joseph's going to present, and I'm sure with questions, him, Mr. Martin, and also Mrs. Lacey Buggs, Mr. Henderson Brown, feel free to jump in as questions come up. As that part of the presentation finishes up, then we'll invite our 2 educators up to be able to speak as well. Pull that up.
Curtis, come over to that one too. Yeah. That way the camera can see you too, so Charlotte and Carla can see you in addition to hearing you.
Good evening.
Do you have a clicker? Do you want to just run
I can
the
click
slides?
for you.
Great, that sounds great. Well, first of all, I want to say thank you to Dr. Milichewski and everyone for the warm welcome here in Reading. It's been an absolute pleasure serving the Reading Public School District as well as community and working alongside such strong leaders like Mr. Martin, Mr. Milichewski, Ms. Hardy, and the staff here. So thank you for the opportunity. As Dr. Milichewski talked about, my role here is really to dig into some empathy interviews to understand the student experiences and really get an idea of what are some of the strengths that have happened with the METCO programming here in Reading over the last couple of years, and what are some stuck points. When you see on this slide in particular, there are 24 empathy interviews that I conducted. So this is by no means a comprehensive report, but it is a good understanding of the stories that have emerged to confirm some of the strong strides that Reading has taken in the last 2 years, as well as some stuck points. About 8% of these reports come from district leaders, 25% from METCO coordinators and staff, 29% from principals, 9% from Boston resident families, 4% from teachers, 8% from some senior METCO alum that have been involved in METCO for decades to understand what is the gold standard for what this program looks like, as well as 17% from Boston resident students. One of the goals was outlining what are the overarching goals for the program, what are some success and bright spots across the district, and what challenges are we facing at this time. The overarching goals were very clear. One, racial diversity. That diversity creates a richer learning environment for all students, that all students are METCO students here in Reading, and that RPS culture is shaped by Reading and Boston students. And then the second goal around inclusive community, that we promote physical, psychological, and cultural safety for all students, and students and families feel a part of the Reading community. As a part of this, I asked the question around what does success look like? This slide really captures what quantitative data we can look at to assess the success of our Reading METCO program. This includes indicators such as achievement, success, and growth on MCAS, as well as sense of belonging data that can be gathered through the new Panorama results as well. Enrollment data, how many students are coming from, how many Boston resident students are choosing to come here in Reading, and how many Boston resident students are we retaining here in Reading. In addition, what's the attendance data? Do students feel welcome here? Are they enjoying coming to school? Are they staying? Are they attending? Are they engaging? Graduation rates. Are students who are, especially Boston resident students, joining Reading and staying through their entire tenure of schooling, as well as discipline referrals. This can be a clear sign that students feel not only engaged in their class and the academic work, feel a sense of belonging in that aspect, but also are becoming and being a strong part of the Reading culture. In addition to the quantitative indicators, are also the qualitative data. This is gathered through, means like empathy interviews and surveys, understanding student and family experience, in particular, to better understand when and how students are feeling welcome and when they are not feeling welcome. This is also evident by after-school participation, student and family involvement in after-school events such as the PTO, the Found Family, athletics, and arts events that are such a rich part of the culture here in Reading. So some of the bright spots that have been acknowledged especially over the last couple of years, is a significant increase in the amount of Boston resident students that we're supporting here in Reading from last year to this year. And this group, as well as all those in public, will also be happy to acknowledge and celebrate the school counselor and METCO site coordinator positions. This was an overwhelming bright spot across the district for a few reasons. One, each one of these strong personnel represents a leader of color with representation in every building across the district. They have been a significant part of improving student and family relationships with each of the schools. The office that they have has created a safe haven and hub for students of color, and they're serving all students in that split role. The split role has really been symbolic of what it means to be an integrated and all-inclusive community, supporting academics and student belonging for not only Boston resident students, but all METCO students here in Reading. Other bright spots are that late buses being added this year have provided increased Boston resident student involvement. That's been a significant spot, especially among students sharing of getting involved in more of the theater, the arts, the sports, and different programming that is available here in Reading. And I think everyone would be pleased to note just the strong commitment to a vision. Connecting with 24 interviews, hearing this common vision of RPS being a METCO district, the clear language, I know that was a significant focus looking at the videos that were created last year, and that's evident that work showed up and how students feel and how student staff are expressing the feeling and the motivation and the direction that Reading's going in. I picked this quote in particular from one of our parents of a Boston resident student. "If my kids are involved, I need to be involved. I'm at every game." And I just think this serves as a really important reminder that the intention of this work is to make sure that we're creating an inclusive community, not only for students, but students' families as well. In addition to those trends that really revealed themselves among the 24 empathy interviews, there's also some positive outliers to note. This includes the SOCA, the Students of Color and Allies, that leads diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging work at the high school. The race class and budgeted historically black college and university tours at the high school as well. The affinity groups at Joshua Eaton and the mentoring program at Killam. When we looked at areas of challenge, the most significant area of challenge is that METCO site coordinators / counselors were feeling comfortable in their role as school adjustment counselors, but still finding their way with the roles and responsibilities of the METCO site coordinator position. This is something that was to be expected. Some of the summer work was thinking about what might be the roles and responsibilities of these positions, but at that time it was not yet known who would be in these roles and who would be in these positions. Now is really an opportunity where we've already, as you've seen through the previous slides, we've had a significant and positive impact from these positions. And now we also have a half a year of experience of understanding where are the bright spots that are occurring in each of our 8 schools and what are some of the stuck points. So as a result, this is a great opportunity to bring greater clarity around what specific roles and responsibilities, as well as district support, is leading to the greatest success across the district. So that led to the recommended action. And this particular action was engaging the METCO director, school counselor / METCO site coordinators, and building principals in developing clear roles and responsibilities for the school counselor METCO coordinator role, and aligning those roles and responsibilities to success indicators. I'm excited to report to you that on this next slide, it outlines we've begun this work with developing a METCO guiding coalition. This METCO guiding coalition, I'm facilitating this, but this includes members of the district leadership team, principals, as well as METCO site coordinators / school counselors, adjustment counselors. This team is responsible for developing those roles and responsibilities for the school counselor, METCO site coordinator positions, as well as aligning those success indicators and developing the system level support. We've begun meeting and we'll meet regularly throughout the spring semester of 2023. And just to give you a little insight of some of the work that's being done, this has been great work to highlight where success points have happened in particular schools and where the challenges have. So in particular, thinking about what does it look like and sound like for these positions to equally support students and families for success in each of their buildings? And how can the district support that level through a system-wide support? So we're talking about ideas of getting each other into other sites and getting into other buildings to learn from what's going strong with their practice, so that what's happening at Killam can also be replicated across the district. And I'm just using Killam as an example because there's highlights in every single school across the district. So that's some of the work that we have just begun that will be the North Star for the Guiding Coalition throughout. And with that, I want to open it up to any questions.
I do have one. So thank you for the presentation. I think it was really clear and well structured. You talked about one of the big opportunities being clarity around the role for METCO coordinators, particularly on that side of the role, or on that piece of the role. I'm curious whether there was anything that came out of the 24 interviews that you did that points you in the direction of this is what the role could be or should be that maybe we're not seeing consistently today. Did that give us kind of a head start in defining some of the elements of that role for us?
Yeah, I believe it did give a strong head start. The clarity of that work mostly comes through the Guiding Coalition, and we have representation from every representation, as you see on the board, from different levels of the system, and I think that's where the most crystal clear clarity is coming, because it's defining, hey, this is working in this particular context, and helping understand that it's because of these conditions that are happening in this particular school that's allowing this to be more successful than it is at another site. So that helps us to understand what sort of conditions do we need to create, whether that's the partnership between the principal and the school counselor / site coordinator, or whether that's particular actions that site coordinator is taking that's having the most impact. So I think that's where the greatest clarity and the greatest asset of this work comes, and most of it comes from success points rather than challenges of seeing, hey, this is really working here, and here are the reasons why.
Yeah. Aaron, go ahead.
I don't know who calls on me.
Under the areas of challenge, you have student representation, small and uneven numbers at schools. Do you mean that our students are just very spread out across, our METCO students are spread out across the district?
Yes, and as significant it is, the jump in numbers, the increase in numbers, it's still quite low as a district, and as a result, the idea is to create a strong cohort learning so that students have mirrors and windows as they're jumping into their education here, Boston resident students. And so, it's thinking about how can we be intentional about supporting cohorts of students, because they're not even at every grade level in every school.
Okay. So is that something also that the coalition will be exploring, or?
That was a discussion point, absolutely.
yeah.
As you can imagine, thinking about the wide area of this, of what these positions cover and being dual roles, there was quite a bit discussed in that first meeting, and a bit of that is now narrowing down of what's our highest impact focus and when do we need to focus on what.
Okay.
But yes, that was definitely a point that was mentioned in our first meeting.
Okay. Because other than continuing to expand the program, which would be great to do at some point, but maybe not right away, I don't know how you get around that.
Yeah, there was mention of some previous practices that have worked well. It's just what is also being connected with what those goals are around inclusive community and around racial diversity, and understanding sometimes that means we might coordinate this a little more than just where open enrollment is, but more about how do we build this inclusive community and cohort structure.
Cohorts. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Just go for it, everybody. I can only kind of see your hand, so no worries.
I'm, as many on this committee know, I'm a data guy. So I'm going to bring us back to the slide that shows the quantitative and qualitative numbers,
Absolutely.
or potential for numbers, I guess is a way to put it. And I'm going to tie it through to the challenges as well, from my perspective, and then get your feedback. And I'd love it from both of you and, the two of you out there as well. As I see this, I was hearkening back to a conversation that the six of us had with candidates for Dr. Milczewski's job when we were interviewing. And one particular candidate had sort of a success index for DEI, basically, where he at the time put together all of these different criteria, and there were different inputs into it, and it became almost a dashboard of sorts that showed the success in there. And then there was a final number, for lack of a better way to say it, that said, we're at 70, we're at 75, we're at 92, we're at 32, right? So we can kind of see that growth over time and make an attainable goal, for lack of a better way to say it. Thinking about that in line with the quantitative stuff and the qualitative stuff, which ultimately you can put some sort of numbers around as well, is it possible to think about that as part of the success criteria that you're thinking about for the program? As these are tangible, deliverable things that we could say, yes, we're graduating our students. Yes, we're retaining our students. Yes, the enrollment is staying steady and or growing. Yes, they're going to colleges and or careers that we're confident in at the same rate as the rest of our student population or better, right? Yes, they're feeling safe and connected and valued. Yes, they're engaged. Yes, they're participating in activities, before school, after school, whatever the case might be. And we're seeing them fully integrated in the community. And if we define that as success, if we could agree to what that metric is, because it's always the debate of how many pieces of the pie do I put into the pie, for that matter, does that lead to roles and responsibilities that help enable that success? So are we starting, I guess that my question is, are we starting backwards, forwards, inside out, in terms of looking at roles and responsibilities? Or do they complement, and can we think about them in parallel as we go through it from a success metric and roles and responsibilities alignment to go through that?
That's a great question. That was a focal point in our conversation as we began the meeting. So as we as we started thinking about brainstorming roles and responsibilities and what's working, a challenge that was presented is we started with the vision that's been clear and established here in Reading, and we named that you have to draw a clear connection between the role of what's happening and what success looks like, as well as how that ties to the vision. If it doesn't tie to the vision, or it doesn't tie to one of those success indicators, it doesn't belong on the roles and responsibility sheet. So everything about this work has to tie with what does success look like, and how does this change the academic and psychological and social experiences for our students. So I think that's, if that addresses your question, yes, 100%. I would call it more of a backwards design, as what does the vision look like, and how are we building these roles and responsibilities to see that to fruition?
Great, I mean, great, I think it partially answers the question. I think it's a matter of, then how do you tie, so you said the example of what's working in a school as an example, and you put like 2 examples in the deck for Josh Wheaton and Killam, right? How do we tie those to what success looks like? What is that process? And how do we use that as part of the measurement of the success, both of the individual and the role, right? We want to make sure you guys are successful and growing and coached as necessary, but also the students as they progress through. Some of these things, you know, we're not going to know in grade 2 whether they graduated or not, right? So it's going to look different for an elementary school versus a middle school versus a high school as well. Ultimately, one of them's a district report card that covers graduation and things like that, but I would imagine there's kind of a subsection that's a data report card for each school, which can feed into areas for improvement, you know, school improvement processes and things like that, that we'd want to tie back together to ultimately make it really part of the community. Because if it's part of school council and school improvement, then it's part of the community as well, and it's not a one-off thing, right? So I'm just trying to make sure we think about it from a full integration perspective.
Yeah, I agree. I think that what you named is just an important connection around how is this tied into strategic planning, not only from a school standpoint with goal setting for these particular positions, but from a strategic planning standpoint for the district as a whole. And as we're creating these and identifying, here's our biggest challenge, which one of these indicators or which set of indicators is closely aligned to? And, you know, and a challenge to make sure, as you named, that we're looking at this over time. So thinking about second graders, what is their experience over the next several years, and how are we keeping connected to even alumni of the Reading Metco program? Curtis, you want to add anything?
Yeah, and I would just say continuing to hear from students and parents and staff members. You know, we've already seen indicators where, you know, sense of belonging, where we have our elementary students who are already going and staying in Reading and going to birthday parties and vice versa. Our Reading families have already been going to Boston for birthday parties, and those connections are really building. And that once we target that and like really nail that in with the self-belonging, that piece is really going to help us in the academic aspect and help students reach their goals that, you know, their parents want, that they want for themselves, that we want for them. Narrowing that down, relationships, we're really going to help grow that. So continue to hear and be able to monitor that like in the moment. Those type of things, you know, there's some of the students who are being more involved in like the elementary level and like the town sports, and that connection where you're building friends over the town and part of band and those different like extracurriculars that are not deeply tied to the school, that are town things. Students are starting to do that, and that's really honing in like our self-belonging, and our parents who are like out here and meeting other parents and, you know, living up to that quote and being here. So those would deeply tie into us seeing those success indicators on a year-by-year basis, because like you're right, we won't really know until we see like the portrait of a graduate almost, right? But I think those things we can help in the moment see where we're improving at, and making sure that the roles, you know, are helping to build like, oh, I noticed this student in this class, these are friends. Oh, would you like to come to an event, and inviting the parents, and how those roles can really narrow into that, how those roles can help support teachers who may need some extra help on just navigating the classroom and working with students. So those things in the moment can really help.
So just one more thing, and then I'll let go as I drill on this. First of all, I love that you highlighted these things, right? And I love that this conversation's happening. I think last year at this time, we were all like, okay, well, what does the role look like? Who's doing what? How do they do it, right? So now we're getting into the nitty-gritty to a degree, which is appropriate and necessary. One of the things I want to be careful here, or encourage you in, is that you're very purposeful about how you collect that data, right? Because if you're not purposeful, it's going to be anecdotal, and when it's anecdotal, it's not measurable, and when it's not measurable, it's not repeatable, right? So the example you just gave, right? They're going to birthday parties, they're going and they're participating in Reading Youth Soccer or Reading Youth Lacrosse, which they can, right? Those kind of things, if you don't measure them, you cannot, if you don't capture that, you cannot use it as a measurement.
Right.
So when you think about success and define success, you've got to think about what you're going to capture as points of information that leads to this metric of sense of belonging or something along those lines, right? So it has to be purposely thought about. It can't be just kind of, oh, well, I know Johnny or Jimmy or Sally or whatever
Right.
went to this thing and, oh, that means their belonging is high. It has to be a little bit more purposeful, and that probably will fall back, would be my guess, on the METCO coordinators, right? To really be able to figure out, how am I going to capture this? What's the important information that would recognize some of this stuff? Some of it's easy. What are the MCAS scores? What are their other assessment scores? You know, that's kind of easy. It's the harder stuff that really demonstrates engagement that we need to purposely plan for and include in the dashboard, for lack of a way to say it.
Appreciate that. I hear that strong focus on, as there's roles and responsibilities defined and aligning those to the success indicators, that's also coupled with the strategy and understanding of, this is when we're collecting this data, analyzing data, and drawing those connection points so that we can learn this increase in student belonging as represented by X is because of these factors. Let's make sure that we replicate that in the following year and track to see if those numbers continue to go up.
They're practicing for one of the plays because there's two 1-act plays in the winter play, so one group is practicing here and the other one's in the pack.
I think they're just excited about the potential.
They're excited about Metco. They're excited about Metco now. Review.
Carla's hand is raised, Sean, so.
Ms. This position obviously is a really unique position for our district just because of the dual role. And I have a few questions for you. One is, currently with the adjustment counselors and METCO coordinators at our elementary level, for example, or all of them, do we have an idea or a sense of the balance or the percentage of time they're doing in each role currently? That was one piece of it.
Carla, do we want to, Theo, do you want to jump in on that?
Right here?
We'll just jump.
You'll just jump in and then you can present to, all right. You might have given us our segue to Theo and Corey.
How you doing this evening? So just kind of speaking on that, the role kind of allows us to be the bridge between the two communities. So it allows us to be the bridge between the Boston community and the Reading community. I would say the balance is some days 50-50, some days 60-40, depends on the day, depends on the need, but it's equal. From my standpoint, we get the opportunity I get to help the Boston residents work, help the transition, and advocate for them each day when they're either going through a bus issue or feeling like they're not belonging in the classroom. But also, I get to be the student adjustment counselor and work with every student and kind of bring that together with the Reading students. So, like Curtis came into our school the other day, for example, and he was leaving my office, and a kid came in wanting to have snack with me during that time. But he was a Reading resident. It was just something that he saw in the moment, but it was something that I've worked on since we've been in the school since September, just kind of building that connection and bringing my own experience to the table as well, too. I started in Needham as a first grader, so having that experience as a student and now being an adult, it's been great kind of giving that back and kind of understanding the plights of our Boston residents and the learning process from the Reading residents as well, too. So I would say the role is 50-50. It's split evenly. Loving the opportunity that I get to have, to work with everyone in the school and make those connections. And just kind of just being that centerpiece, for all the kids in the school.
Carla, do you want to continue?
Yeah, can I continue? Can I just ask a couple more questions? Thank you for that answer. I'm having a little trouble hearing you, so I am going to listen back to your answer later on.
Okay.
And is somebody going to talk about?
Let me just readjust real quick. Why don't the two of you come up over here? If you don't mind.
Them do their, I think that covers some of this.
Even if they are, that way
No,
they
I
can be
mean,
heard.
before Carla's question.
I don't know, Tom, Dr.
Do we wanna
Sean,
have
did you
them?
want to?
Yeah, I think, Carl, if it's okay with you, do you mind if I could just introduce Corey and Theo? Because it sounds like we're moving into like the day-to-day of the role, which is awesome, just so I can introduce them and give them a chance, and then you can ask anyone a question. Maybe I should have done it up front, but here we are, alas. So, thank you. So just also like to introduce, so you just met Theo Henderson Brown is our school counselor, METCO SAC, METCO coordinator at Joshua Eaton, and then Corey Lacey Buggs, who's our school counselor, METCO coordinator. It's a mouthful, right, every day, at Killam. And I think both have jumped in, if you're familiar with the Killam and Jay communities, both have jumped in from day one into the roles, developed really positive relationships with our students, staff, and families, and I think we're really optimistic about the impact that they both already had on their school communities. I think they both came into us as accomplished educators, so I think it would be nice, and I asked them to come tonight since we're speaking high level about the program, but then to hear directly from them about what's this new role been like? So just informally, what's your day-to-day like? How have you seen the roles? What's working in the role? What are maybe some pain points of the roles? How do you see the role moving forward? So it was just kind of an informal piece in that way too. So I guess I'd just ask each of you just to introduce yourselves a little bit, maybe share a little bit about your background, and then kind of talk a little bit about the role. And I'm sure, as you'll see, the committee will have just questions to jump into.
So I'll start. I'm Corey Lacey Buggs. I'm working every day at Killam Elementary, which is a really special and unique place. I'm enjoying my time there, and when I was sort of tasked with the idea of thinking about my day-to-day, it was sort of like, okay, let's go through it, Corey. And I started obviously first looking at like my calendar and sort of like what the structure is on a day-to-day. And so if we're thinking about the calendar structure, right, the idea is to be present in school when students are entering the building. And that's to receive Boston resident students that are coming in, making sure that they're transitioning effectively, especially at the elementary level, because it is such a long commute. They're up extremely early, and it's just sort of making sure that everyone is ready for school today, right? If there are issues that have arisen on the bus, we work with that to help them transition in to the classroom and to get settled in to learn for the day. And then next, it sort of becomes the morning rounds, as I call it. So I have a lot of students that are on my radar. I work with the majority of all gen ed kids throughout Reading and Boston resident students as well. So it's checking in classrooms, peeking in as they're beginning their day. They're picking out lunch selections for the day. They're going over the morning schedule and just being able to be a part of their day and to sort of see how they're all adjusting and watching how they're transitioning. Do they have the skills to do it? Where are the struggles the most? And I think that's more of the social and adjustment piece that we look for, right? Because at the elementary level, you want kids to be adjusting to school life. And you want to make sure that they're doing it in ways that they're successful and they have like hurrah moments, because that matters at that age, right? And then once you kind of recognize that all of your, as I call them, like my frequent flyers, the ones that are sort of on my radar all the time, are fine for the day, then it's sort of preparing for lunch groups. We run a lot of groups at this age. Peer engagement and peer interactions are so important for student learning. And so running those groups back to back through lunch experience times, being outside at recess to do observational work is key. Really using recess as a milieu space to really see how behaviors come out for children. We can talk about children in context all day long in SST meetings and all of that, but to actually see behaviors in full view is key. And being able to get in and coach in the moment, right? Because these are teachable moments for children, so you want to be able to get in there and do that work. And then I would say after classrooms, reconvene for the day, then it's more administrative work, right? And so now it becomes, following up with parents. If there's an issue on the bus and my students are involved, Theo's students are involved, I'm on the phone with Theo, I'm like, do you have 10 minutes so we can check in? And do we need to do a seat adjustment on the bus? Am I gonna talk to Mr. Dominic, the bus monitor today, or you? And so it's just a lot of that coordinating to make sure that the ride back home is successful and that, kids are still feeling good about coming back to school the next day. There's no anxiety about peer dynamics. And yes, you might have had a hiccup with a friend at Joshua Eaton today, but we've managed to figure that out. So by the time the two of you get back on the bus, you know, you would have had two adults that have really communicated with you about what you need to be doing, and behaving and treating one another in that capacity. And then I would say after that, it's really just dismissal and making sure everybody gets on the bus. My students tend to, some of my boys are a little bit more rambunctious during the day, so they like a little gym time, they want to shoot some hoops, and the bus is here, so I'm like, where's everybody? Get on the bus. So it's a lot of like trying to herd cattle at that hour. But that's sort of a typical day-to-day for me, in the event that it's smooth, right? That there's like no crisis, there's nothing that's come up, you know, we're not short-staffed that day, we're not covering for one another. But it's a school. I mean, that's the beauty of a school environment. It can be, as much as we try to keep it predictable, it can be unpredictable.
So I'm Theo Henderson Brown. I work at Joshua Eaton as a medical coordinator, school adjustment counselor. I would say the same thing as Corey. Just being present is, I would say, is the biggest thing. Walking the halls, being out at recess, being at lunch, and just being present in the school, and also being part of the building leadership team as well. It's been really great. It's been able to be, you're able to kind of make more of an impact that way as well. For me, just I would say day to day, usually my day starts with either a math group with some of my Boston residents, or just to check in with some of my other Reading residents, or just anybody that, hey, Mr. Brown, I need your help, you know, when I walk in. Okay, I got you. What do you need right now? So just being aligned with the principal, having constant communication every day, knowing that we're on the same team, trying to reach the same goal, has been really helpful. Always in communication with Corey. I said we probably talk like 3 times a week on the phone, just kind of figuring things out. How do we best make our impact here, and how do we best help the students work towards success each day? So I think that's the biggest priority that we have. But just overall having a lot of fun doing the job. It's been great since September. Looking forward for just watching every student grow each day, whether it's academically, socially, or emotionally. Doing our lunch groups has been awesome. Just covering different topics such as positive peer interactions, anxiety, expected, unexpected behaviors, things like that we kind of cover just to kind of help them navigate this journey that they're going on in elementary school. But it's fun. Elementary schools are definitely unpredictable. It's working with the K through 5. It's been awesome aligning myself with, the teachers and just kind of being a team. It's been really great.
Chuck's got his hand up. Sean, do you want to just have open forum again, or?
Yeah, let's Wild West here and so forth.
And do I know we can
Cut Carla off too, so Carla, maybe we should let Carla finish.
Go ahead. All right. Go ahead, Chuck. You can go first.
I don't know who this question, I think it might be for Curtis. So at the outset of the meeting, Dr. Hardy talked about kindergarten enrollment and all. How are we tying our METCO program into that? So that, you and I have talked about this, the early we can get the kids in here is in whether they be if they're part of a family that's already here, that's easier, but maybe they may be the first one in the family. How are we tapping into that so that they have the opportunity to know about it and apply that way, or can't we do it that way?
So METCO headquarters handles that part of it in regards to what grade students are in. So there's kindergartners, family signing students up, and once you turn 5, you can sign up for the METCO program. And then from there, it just goes to the district requesting, we'll take kindergarten students this year, and it's divvied out and split that way. This year we had one kindergarten student, and that's because we was really, at first it was really a numbers of games and how many kids we can get on the bus. Like, we had spots open in different grade levels, but being more strategic and making sure we had like a cohort, 2 kids in 2nd grade at each school when we're talking about all 5 elementary schools. So thinking about that way, and then thinking about how many kids we could fit on that bus, we kind of at first was like, we'll start at like 2nd grade. That also was a little personal too, in regards to like my own personal experience. Like, I felt that me starting at 2nd grade, all the way to finishing high school, that was a good age group for me, where I feel like some other students who started younger, it was a different like struggle once they got older. But we really can take kindergartners, and kindergartners are always signing up. And it just matters of, we do have seats in different grade levels, but how many kids can we fit on the bus, right? And we wanted to be at a point where we had at least 10 kids at each graduating class, to be a little even. But our numbers are a little very different, just to try to get through this first cohort of students to fulfill our increase. So we was a little all over the place, and that's how we got kindergartners. But in the future, we definitely can, and it really just depends on like the bus. So like if this kindergarten student comes in, like we might have to hold off on kindergarten next year, depending on how many kids we have on the bus. And then when that kindergarten comes to second grade, we might be able to add, more students at his grade level, but split them up at the different elementary schools. Yes, I hope that answers.
Yeah, it does. I think with your presentation where you had all the different measurements, belonging, graduating, I mean, if they're starting early, I think that helps those outcomes.
Sure. It definitely can.
Carla, do you want to hop in now?
Yes, thank you. So I have two quick questions for probably Corey and Theo. If you can just talk about the affinity groups at Joshua Eaton and the mentoring program at Killam, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, so the affinity group at Joshua Eaton just kind of allows our Boston residents and students of color in Joshua Eaton just kind of get together in one space, speak freely about their experience. Whether it's, we're just eating lunch or whether we're playing games, it kind of just allows them to kind of get together and just talk freely about their own experience here in Reading. Whether that is a great experience in the moment or whether they're struggling with making friends or with struggling with the teachers as well too. So just overall allowing them that free space to talk about their experience here in Reading.
And that's just done at Joshua Eaton for Joshua Eaton students? Is it done at the other schools as well? Seems like a good idea that should be done probably.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
That's one of the things.
That's why it's a highlight, right?
That's one of the things we're working about, and the work that we're doing with Joseph is making sure like every school we're kind of all on the same page and doing the same things, especially when something's working, right? Making sure that we're all doing the same things and consistent.
Great. Thank you, Theo.
So at Killam, we have started the mentoring program. It was sort of birthed out of this committee that I am now on with Sarah for the sense of belonging. And we were in the leadership, we call it our KILT meeting. So we were thinking about how we could increase students' sense of belonging at Killam. And so what we decided was to charge staff with taking on a student to mentor in the building. And some of these mentor partnerings would come from referrals that are coming out of SSTs or students that we know have struggles. So it's open to all students, but in particular, we charged staff with wanting to come forward to mentor every MECO student, right? So every MECO student in the building or a Boston resident student in the building would be partnered with a staff member in the building to have a mentoring relationship with. And basically, at the elementary level, the way that looks is more like, who is your person in the building? Like, who is your safe person? When you're having a hard day, when you're going through something, every child should at least have one adult in the building that they can count on to support them. And so we charged all the teachers at Killam to come forward and be a part of that program. And we've had great success and teachers really wanting to be involved, and even our janitors, Mr. Ken is a mentor, and all the kids want Mr. Ken for their mentor. Like, his kids rides in the hall, and yeah, they all love Mr. Ken. But it's been great. We even have cafeteria staff that have volunteered, and it's just been, it's been incredible to see everyone's commitment to student experiences. But if we're going to think about sense of belonging, it's just not with Boston resident students, it's all students at Reading. We want all students to feel like they belong at Killam.
I just want to lift up, if I could just lift up those practices, because those are some of the very topics we discussed in our meeting. And this is the nature of, everything couldn't be predicted coming into this year, but through an organic nature, these bright and effective practices are emerging. And now's an opportunity to share those practices and really systematize that across the district at a time where there is success to hold on to. And true learning that's happened along the way that can be shared with colleagues so that they have a clear path on how to structure that in their own sites in a successful manner.
Arla, do you have anything else?
No, thank you, everybody.
Sean had his hand up.
Sean, did you?
Yeah, just a couple things. So Corey, I loved hearing you talk about the day, and it sounds like most days it's a really great job, which is kind of great to hear. I am curious, from both of you, you're kind of 4 or 5 months into the role, or at least into the time in the district. Is there anything that's, surprised you either about the role of the district positively or negatively? And then maybe related, maybe not, as we sit here kind of in the middle of our budget process, like, what are you seeing in your, in your schools and in your experience with the students in your schools that is a need from a resources perspective that we should be thinking about, if not in this budget cycle, then certainly in the next one, to kind of help you be as successful as possible?
Well, off the top of my head right now, one particular thing that I'm really working hard to, I'm trying to build more supportive resources for social and emotional work with the students, and more so on the therapeutic side, as far as like outpatient services for families. So coming out of COVID, there are just things happening at home, that are just, it affects everyone. And things at home obviously trickle into school because students this young carry everything, right? And so sometimes it's just being able to connect families to a resource that can really help them in certain moments. And I think being so new to Reading, I've been really relying on my colleagues in the district to put me in contact with those collaterals. Because I can do a successful job in partnering my Boston resident students with Boston resources because that's my network. But I'm also simultaneously trying to build this new Reading network. And it's been a challenge because the resources are really stretched this far north. And I think it's just a mental health crisis that we're sort of in right now. So for me, that's sort of one of the challenges that I've been seeing on our end. But I think, it requires just a lot of forward thinking. It requires just really getting in more with community, making connections. I'm trying to establish a relationship now with Reading DCF, just trying to get to know people. I've been partnering with the Reading Police Department right now, trying to work with the LMHCs that they have there available for the whole town. It's a beautiful program that they have at the police department. Families don't have to use insurances to see these clinicians who are wonderful and very well skilled in all matters. So it's just being able to sort of align those resources, keep those connections open, so we can really give families the resources that they need. I think one of my biggest pet peeves is when I have a parent that is looking for a resource and I don't have one to give. That really, everybody needs when someone comes to you for help, you have to be able to provide that resource. That's what a school hub is for.
Okay. Yes, it's great to hear about that partnership with the RPD. I think, even that program and the mental health clinicians there are new, even within within the last year or so. So it's great to hear that we're already seeing that partnership. I know there's not enough, but it's great to see the partnership. Thank you.
I would say the biggest surprise for me is just the communication that I've been able to have with the parents that live in Reading, and how surprised they are I would say how happy they are that we are here and kind of making that change in the school. And I would say more about their children going home talking about Mr. Brown, or just how we're here, and just being able to be in the school and having that connection with the children and families. I think that's the best part of the job that I've seen thus far. Just making that connection between the Boston and Reading families, and just with myself as well too, being part of the community, being part of the school community, and being part of the Joshua E. and Reading community as well too. That's the best part and the biggest surprise that I've seen.
Thank you.
You want to say something?
Oh, yeah.
You look like you do.
I wasn't sure when to jump in, but.
Jump in now.
But I just want to say, MECO has been around for decades, almost 60 plus years, and success at MECO, MECO hasn't really reached its full potential, and success in districts meant, MECO's, staff, only working with Boston resident students. Right? And those students being able to have that self-belonging, achieve their academic goals, and go to their college, but the staff only works with Boston resident students. But when the district signs up for something, it's not really about it's about helping every student, right? And when Dr. Milichewski talked about building a more just society after MLK, that's what MECO can do. And this role, the way it's dual, there's no other district doing that. And instantly their impact for our Boston resident students of color happens immediately, for our Reading students of color happens immediately, but the impact that it's happening on our non-students of color in the building and our families. And Mr. Brown mentioned previously, I was at Eaton yesterday, and we were talking after a meeting and still following up, but us talking took away from another student who was waiting for Mr. Brown. A white student from Reading knocking at the door of Mr. Brown. Our group time, we're supposed to meet and we're almost going to be over. So for me, everything comes full circle. That is what it's supposed to be, right? This student working with someone who is of color, and being able to get that early experience, right? And this is the MECO role. And I think that is when we really put this together, how we build a just society, and everyone's working together, everyone's learning from different experiences and different cultures. I started in second grade in Wayland. Theo started in first grade in Needham through the MECO program. Corey started in second grade in Sudbury. We've all can kind of share that same experience where we've had good experience, but we only worked with, that good experience was only with the MECO staff, right? And, our town friends would come in, but it was almost like, oh, can I come in? Where now it's the kids knocking on the door, Mr. Brown, where you are? Where are you? We're late. It's me getting to my office from another school, and I see students from Reading in my office having lunch. Whether it be students of color or non-students of color, they feel like that's a place to go. And our goal is that we can get our portrait of grade. We can pick any student out the bunch, and they can say, MECO helped me understand this. MECO helped me provide me the ability to listen to people, to understand them, instead of listening to respond to them. And these are the type of things that will help us, in the MLK's name, build a more just society, just putting everyone in a room together and letting people live out friendships and experience with no outside influence other than kids being kids. And us strengthening those relationships, and which helps with the teachers and in the classroom and the experience. But, seeing that student Mr. Brown, what are you doing? We only have a few minutes left. We're supposed to have a group right now. That was the full circle moment for what it is that we're trying to do and what we can be. What MECO looks like when we're truly benefiting, everyone's benefiting from it. And thank you, to Joseph, I'm honored that he wanted to do this, right? That the work that we've done, all of us and all of our staff throughout the district inspired him. He could have picked anything in our district to focus on, but this is what inspired him and what he wanted to do and work with. And work with him has been great as he helped us, and everyone has the same goals. I feel everyone just wants to get it right. And I'm glad, Joseph's here with us and that this is what he chose to, focus on and putting all this work together for us.
I have just one final, I guess, for me at least, note or comment here is, I don't know how we did this before we had this, the 5 of you or 6 of you with this program, listening to your day-to-day and listening to how you're interacting and how the work is happening and trying to figure out how was that happening before, right? And, well, frankly, it probably wasn't, except for like crisis management, and that's not when you want to be engaging, right? You want to be there as building the relationship, so when the crisis happens, you can de-escalate pretty quickly, right? And so I'm, just listening to your day-to-day, I don't know if inspired is the right word, but I'll say it. I'm inspired by the way in which you're presenting those things and what I'm hearing about the schools and the way in which the kids are being, brought together. Mr. Martin, I remember sitting down for lunch when you first got here and going through this and exchanging, for like we were say, war stories of our own growing up and how we wanted this kind of interaction, Mr. Curtis, how we wanted this whole thing to come together and seeing that, I'm bought in. I always was bought in, but I'm even more bought in than I was before. I want to encourage as well, Corey, with regards to looking for those resources, build up that library, right? The counselors at the middle school hopefully have some of that resource. The coalition, I'm assuming that's who you're working with as well at the police department. Build up that library and then make it a public library, because I think a lot of people are going to need that, and
It's a whole
that
piece
focus,
of like, even as coordinators, and we've been talking a lot about, having those shared resources and where to keep them, and as we get them, sharing them, like Greg at the middle school found another resource. He aligned another family with another great resource, and so it's just sort of building our tool belt in that way, so that we can, as I said it before, schools are the hub of a community in many ways. They come to us, parents, families come to us for so many different things, so many different resources. And, in this role, you want to make sure that you're providing that they know the school is a safe hub. It's a space not only safe for their kids on a daily basis, but for their family as a whole. And we want them to be able to count on that.
Excellent. All right. Thank you all. I appreciate that, the time and the presentation this evening. I'll echo a lot of what Tom said. Very sort of encouraging to hear how well it's going and how critical your roles have been. And I think you've got 6 folks up here who are all bought in. So appreciate the work that you're doing very much.
Sean, because one thing too is obviously I think everyone in the JE and Killam community knows how lucky we are to have, Theo, and in the Killam community how lucky we are to have Corey here. I'd also just like to acknowledge too the great work of our other counselors who aren't here tonight too. So Joanne Martin at Barrows, Cindy Marte at Birch Meadow, Nidhi Mendez at Wood End, and then also Greg Kanzader, who's at Mr. C, who's in the coordinator role at both Parker and Coolidge too. So while they're not up here tonight, they're very much a part of the team, and just like would all acknowledge their great work too. And that there'd be a lot of similarities and experiences, but also some like different best practices. And I think that we're trying to bring all those together. So huge thank you to both for coming out. I know it's been a long day too. So
Thank you very much. Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you guys so much.
Curtis.
Thank you.
Okay, so that will take us to our final agenda item for the evening. I just wanted to, again, include an agenda item here if there's any further budget discussion at this point that the committee would like to have. I know we've had several meetings on this, and we've all had opportunities to speak to Dr. Milashevsky and Ms. Baton and others. So if there's nothing, that's fine, but the window's open if anybody has anything they want to raise for discussion with the committee this evening. can't see Carla's head. I see 4 nodding no's, heads nodding no. I'm going to assume Carla's head is also nodding no.
I'm good, thank you.
Okay.
No, we're not leaving.
All right.
Hold on, Sean, hold on. I was looking to make sure I wasn't like cannibalizing the conversation yet, so, and I guess as I was looking back through and listening back through and, going, through the deck again and again and again, I want to echo what Dr. Corum said to start, is that it's very impressive how we were able to pull everything together. You all were able to pull everything together and align it, right? I do have 2 kind of lingering concerns that I want to, we'll sit down to go through some of them over the next couple days, but just put it out there for people is I'm both very excited in some of the special education work we're able to do to find money to do some of the funding for other things, and I'm also very nervous by that. I want to make sure that and I believe we've set enough of a carve out for it. What's our backstop if that carve out is eaten up? Because the worst thing in my mind that can happen is if a student really needs to go out of district and we don't have the finances for it. So I just want to put a pin in that and say that's something I still have some concerns about. I know that Susan done a phenomenal job, Jen did a phenomenal job looking through it. I don't have any doubts in the data they've done. We just never know, right? It's the never know factor that I'm concerned about. And I'll put it out there as well. I think many in this district have had the perception that a true placement that they thought should happen wasn't happening because of finances. And I don't want this to say, here's another reason, right? So I just want to be careful about that and say, we think there's enough here, and if there's a problem, we'll figure out how to solve it. We're not going to send you where you need to go. All the more reason, the reason we found that, or we were able to do that, is because so much has happened positively in district with our programs. So that's an amazing thing to say. So that's one thing. The second thing I have is, and I've seen some questions, I've fielded some questions from people, I'm sure many on the committee have as well. Sean kind of raised it before, full day kindergarten, are we still on path? Are we able to get there? And, Susan, you and I traded notes, so I'll give you a chance here to kind of answer some of it. Is when I was looking back at the model and refreshing the model and whatnot that we did last year, one of the questions was, are we still going to plan for $1.1 million offset this year? I think the answer to that is no, which sets us up for the next 2 years. But Susan, I know you had kind of thought through that, so if you want to address that quickly as part of the full day kindergarten conversation as well.
Sure, I'd be happy to. So in helping us to absorb the offset for full day K, we've done a couple things. One is for FY24, with the town's support through community priorities and with some of the action we've taken to best leverage our existing resources, we've been able to reduce that $1.1 million by $500,000. So beginning in FY24, we'll be working with an offset to absorb of $600,000. This year, we have been super fortunate, although we budgeted an offset of $1.1 million, we were still able to reduce the cost of tuition for families. And we plan to savings in this year's operating fund. So with this year's operating budget, we'll be able to support the decrease in this year's tuition. We'll end the year with the same revolving fund balance of $621,000 that we started the year with. That could be used to continue to decrease the tuition over the next couple of years. With the revenue that we've generated this year from full day K, we'll be able to pay, I think it's about $730,000 of the $1.1 million offset. I know there are a lot of numbers that I've just described, but I think the bottom line is that we've been able to apply savings to reduce tuition, and we're building a pathway toward absorbing the full offset over the next couple of years so that we can open full day K to everyone in the community at no cost.
Thank you, Susan. Sean, just asked if he could ask a question as well.
Well,
Sure, go ahead. Chuck, just one sec. So, just because I want to follow up on that. So, Susan, I think the way that, you know, when you and I talked about this, the way that helped me understand it is essentially what we've done is reduced our dependence on the revolving fund this year. So it's starting us on that path to where, you know, some number of years from now, hopefully not too many more, we'll be in a place where we don't need that 1.1 million to pad our budget, so to speak, meaning that we won't need the tuition that replenishes that 1.1 million on an annual basis, essentially. You know, as much as I had hoped that we would reduce the tuition further, I do understand that essentially what we've done is we've taken a pretty significant step towards reducing our dependence on the tuition for the first time. Whereas we reduced the tuition last year, but sort of had to maintain the same degree of offset to be able to do that.
Even just to clarify that, Sean, right, we maintained the same degree of offset in the budget, but we're carving the offset back as we go throughout this year to only match the revenues coming in this year. Right? So then instead of 1.1 million, it's going to be what, you know, somewhere between 700 and 800,000, which means that the revolving fund is going to stay flat. So we still have the full 6.2 million from the revolving, or 620,000, sorry.
It's like, what?
620,000 from the revolving fund to carry forward for the next 2-3 years to support the ramp down that we've been planning for.
Yes.
All right, go ahead, Chuck. Sorry about that.
yeah, thank you, Sean. It's not a question, but just, I mean, I guess I'll continue what Tom's statement, and something that I've been thinking about for a while, and it's something we think about every budget year when we add positions, is sustainability. And I appreciated Ms. Baton's you know, ability to take from here and take from there, and I kind of wish it was, you know, we had a more, what's the word I'm looking for, one specific place or wherever we can get, and I just don't know whether we're going to be looking at this again next year, and where can we go to get, you know, the funds to be able to continue to sustain. I'm rambling on, but you know what I'm saying? I'm not saying I mean, I've been one of the biggest proponents of the elementary AP, and still am. I guess I just got to still get my arms around it before we vote, but you know, it's every year, anytime, any position we have, that's the first thing I always look at. And thank you for bringing that up, is just sustainability. You know, it's because the last thing you want to do is have to rip something out of a budget that you put in the year before.
On that front, one of the things I was thinking about, Chuck, is you know, just as Susan so carefully goes through in this budget and says, this amount of the amount we got from FinCom is our basic carry forward number. I think it's like 1.25 or something like that this year, Susan, keep me honest, but somewhere in that range. I want to go through the academic exercise of, and I know Susan's already done this, like multi-year forecast, but I want to go through and understand that multi-year forecast and what different permutations of different contracts we have coming forward and other things like that will impact that 1.2, and what does it look like, as well as the remaining ESSER roll-off that we have, where there's still some staff in the ESSER funds, and what does that look like next year? That's when that ends. So as we come to FY25, we will be funding that wholly. There's no more ESSER funds in FY25. So it's really, you know, the 1.25 plus the remaining 250 some odd thousand of the ESSER funds. So we got 1.5 million or so before we have anything else additional, and before we have any contractual increases, right? So thinking about that as we go through from an incremental increase year over year, that's what that sustainability number is. We've got to figure out how that looks, because that will impact a lot of our other negotiations and thoughts as we go forward as well, and wanting to make sure that we're, you know, fair with all parties, but also, you know, making sure we can move ourselves from a district perspective in the strategy and direction we want to go.
Susan.
I just wanted to add one thing. I'm sorry, my network is a little unstable this evening, so I might not have caught all of that. But I did want to share with the committee and the community that in addition to taking a look at how we're using current year funding and how we can better use them for the next year, we do spend a lot of time in developing multi-year financial models so that we are keeping track of student groupings and ratios, enrollment projections, cost changes, out of only what's happening today, but what may very well likely happen over the next couple of years, and coming up with a couple of alternate scenarios, Plan B, Plan C, if things shift and change. So it's quite a juggling act, but I did want to offer that up as one of the ways in which we're determining sustainability. And then also we're constantly reviewing our assumptions as trends change, as revenue shifts and changes, as funding and expenditure shift and change. We're constantly reevaluating that. So sometimes we just never know what will happen, but we are being extremely careful when we're, shifting and changing positions, adding positions to ensure that we can continue to afford these roles, even given a shift or change in the economy or a shift and change in student needs.
Thank you, Susan.
Can I, Sean and Susan, I know that it certainly wasn't my comment wasn't a criticism at all. I know that, and I know that, we've never had multi-year type presentations put in front of us, and I really appreciate that, so.
Okay, anything else before we entertain a final motion? Okay, would anyone like to make a final motion?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion to adjourn by Tom, seconded by Aaron, and we will close out with a roll call as well. Chuck?
Yay.
Sarah?
I'll go with a yay, too.
Aaron?
Yay.
Tom?
Yippee.
Carla?
Yay.
And Sean will close us out with a woohoo. Okay.
It's going to a Brazilian steak.
We'll see you next week.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Safe trip.
Thank you.